Shalom, shalom, shalom. As you can see, after a bit of contemplation and prayer, I decided to continue part 5. One of the things I wanted to talk about is a comment that was left on yesterday's video. So let's take a look. So Tree of Eternal Life says, Yesu never told you to repeat the same words. But this is what most Christians do. We didn't directly say this. He said, we pray this way, okay? And as I told her, and I assume that's a her from the picture, what do most Christians do? They copy his words. And this is what I heard as a Mormon. This is what I heard in a Pentecostal church, in a Baptist church. It's what I hear from my wife. You just copy the words. And let's go through those words. First, exalt the Father in heaven. Okay. Does he need to be exalted? Did Moses tell you that when you pray, and there is no commandment on prayer, just like there's no commandment on fasting, that you should pray in this manner, should fast in this manner, like he says in the same chapter? No. Thy kingdom come. Why is his kingdom not all around us? We have to pray for his kingdom to come. I mean, you realize you're praying to a spirit, praying for a spirit's will. And it's just like being delivered from the evil one. If you're obeying Torah, and it's what I say last, you will not be bothered with any affliction. It's not like it's just willy-nilly sending the evil one to tempt you. Will the real Messiah please stand up?
For yourself, but let's read Daniel 9.
Oh, we got to slow this down a little bit. Otherwise, it's going to be totally incomprehensible. I was listening to it at that speed yesterday.
24 through 27, it says 70 weeks are...
So he's reading Daniel 9, and, they love this passage. The first, and it's not even quoted in the New Testament, it's pointing to him. The first reference to it, I believe, is Origen in the 2nd century. But let's go through this.
Determined upon your people and upon your holy city. So this is talking about people of Israel, holy city, Jerusalem, to finish transgression, to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, which is lawlessness.
So what iniquity was it talking about? They assume it's all iniquity for all time, but clearly that's not the case for the last 2,000 years, right?
And to bring in an everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision of prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. There's a lot going on right there, which I think we could sit here and break down. We can prove to you the Messiah accomplished these things, but let's...
So, okay, so let's just talk about that, because you believe you can prove that. Okay. Did he finish transgression for the holy city? No, because the holy city sat empty of the promised people for 2,000 years. Did he make an end of sins? No. And, this is your understanding that I'm going by, not what Daniel was actually saying. And he made reconciliation for iniquity. Really? Then why was the city left vacant for 2,000 years? To bring in everlasting righteousness. And this is a mistranslation. Olam can mean everlasting, or could mean an age of ages. And that's what Daniel was talking about. To seal up the vision and prophecy. And this is the one that they really ignore. And this is why I'm going to point to this in this study and show you something interesting. See, vision and prophecy, even according to them, should have been sealed when this happened. Yet they still believe in prophets and priests and all this. But according to Daniel, there is no prophecy anymore, right? And to anoint the most holy. Okay, when did that happen? Where is he? Where's the king? Where's the leader of Israel? Up in the sky? It doesn't say that. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem, and right there should be like a big ding, 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 ding. That's key to understanding. That's the key to understanding until the anointed one, which is the translation. You see, this is like how the translators are so corrupt. Like, look at Psalm 212. This is another perfect example, and I bet he uses this one. Kiss the Son lest he become angry, right? And Christians that love this. See, it says kiss the Son. In Hebrew, it doesn't. I mean, let's go back to verse 7, where it says, I will surely tell you the decree of Yahweh. And he said to me, you are my son. Okay, who's he talking about? Exodus 4:22. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says Yahweh, Israel is my son, my firstborn. So let's look at the Hebrew here. The word son is beneh. Beneh.
Strong's H1121. Bane.
Or bane,
Bane.
if you don't have the yod at the end, which is, if you go back, Psalm 2:7, the author in Hebrew used the same word. Then we get to verse 12, and we have the word nasak bar. And bar in Aramaic can mean son. Bar in Hebrew never means son. And there's like so many translations use this corrupt interpretation. And look what it says. Some ancient versions do homage purely and lay hold of instructions. What do you mean some ancient versions? This is what the text says in Hebrew. Nasak bar is not son. And if you look at like the deeper context here, like one verse is like doing this. Oh wow, there it is. And you're not even doing that in Hebrew. You're doing it in a translation. And this is exactly what you're doing with Daniel 9. So this should read, serve Yahweh with fear, rejoice with trembling, embrace purity or do homage in purity, lest he become angry and you perish in the way. Who's he? Yahweh. But because of this translation, you believe it's the Son. You see how perverted it becomes? And you just build pretext upon pretext, line upon line, which remember is a curse. Cherry picking is a curse. For his wrath, Yahweh, may soon be kindled. How blessed are all who take refuge in him. Yahweh. So Daniel 9 is in the middle of a context, and 70 weeks have been determined for your people and for your holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make an atonement for iniquity. And none of that happened in the first century. You can't atone for sin with human sacrifice. To bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal provision and prophecy, and to anoint the Holy of Holies. So you are to know and have insight that from the going out of the word to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. See, this is where they get confused. See, they say the rebuilding of Jerusalem happened in the 5th century BC, and then there was 480 years. But that's not what it says. It says that this will happen at the 69th week of years. See, the weeks represent Sabbaths, and this is another place where the translation totally deceives you. Of course, Adam highlights the transliteration as well, Messiah the Prince, and says, where is the Messiah in the Old Testament? No, this is a straw man. There are many Messiah in the Tanakh, many. And Adam, who claims to be a Jew and growing up a Jew, he should know this fact. The fact that he's lying, and maybe he was like a Reformed Jew and didn't know Hebrew, I'll give him that possibility. But he still should know Hebrew. He's trying to teach people the truth. And he says this utter lie. You know how many times the word Messiah is in the text? This is something you've been reading in the book of Nehemiah, and this is what he says next to his
Verse 25.
guest.
Know therefore and understand that you're like, where's Messiah in the Old Testament? Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So that's 69 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. And this is something you've been reading recently in the book of Nehemiah.
Yeah. So there you go. The fulfillment of Daniel 9 is talked about in Nehemiah, in Ezra, Second Chronicles, in Zechariah. All of these are pointing to the same time. And we'll get to Isaiah 53 too, because that's the same time. It's about the Babylonian exile. So, yet you both persist in this false interpretation of Daniel 9 about the first century. When did Yeshua issue the order to restore and rebuild the waste places? And I know that's not your claim, but that's the key to context. Daniel 9, 1 to 2, in the first year, and to see this is going back even further in the context. Understand, Darius the son of Artaxerxes, from the seed of Medes, who was made king over the kingdom of the Chaldeans in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, discerned in the books the number of the years concerning which the word Yahweh came to Jeremiah, the prophet, for the fulfillment of the laying waste of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. Presumably, why presume the 70 weeks are not connected to the 70 years of exile? You assume that it's 490 years more in the future, but it's not what he's saying. It is the same context. If we take the 69 weeks times 7, we come up with 483. Well, I'm glad you, unlike the lunar Sabbath keepers, can do math, Adam. But the problem is you're doing it in reverse order. See, Daniel was not prophesying to some future generation 480 years in the future to be looking for the anointed one to restore and rebuild Jerusalem again. He was pointing backward. The 69th week represents 69 years, the end of the exile in Babylon. The command to rebuild, which is when, according to the text. Well, absolutely. I mean, how could you believe that nonsense? So you're to know the insight, how going out to a word to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, right? And that's the key to the context. This is another case where understanding the source text is so useful. The 69 weeks or 69 years. And we could prove this definitively. After the 69 years of weeks, Cyrus or Artaxerxes issued the order to restore and rebuild the waste places. That's what this is about. Second Chronicles 36:21, to fulfill the word of Yahweh by the mouth of Jeremiah until the land had made up for its Sabbaths at Sabbato, all the days of its desolation. It kept the Sabbath until the 70 years were fulfilled. See the connection here? They were not keeping the Shemitah and the Jubilee Sabbaths. So that 490 years is why they spent 70 years in exile. And this is why Daniel is talking about the 70 weeks. 70 weeks. This is why digging into the Hebrew is so crucial. Now look back at Daniel 9:24. 70 Sibyoam weeks, Shabuim, has been determined for your people. Sabum Salim. It's that simple. The same concept we see in Second Chronicles, in Jeremiah, in Isaiah, but you ignore it for your pretext and for the holy city to finish the transgression. See, now this makes sense, right? To finish the transgression of missing their Sabbaths, to make an end of sin. What is this talking about? The end of their sin of missing Sabbaths, to make atonement for the iniquity, to atone for their iniquity of missing the Sabbaths, of sacrificing their children to foreign gods for Yehovah. And then they bring in the age of righteousness to seal up the vision and prophecy. And I truly believe this happened when they came back from Babylon. This is why there's no more prophetic writings. This is the end. There's nothing from 400 or 500 BC when this happened to today. This is part of why you can know the New Testament is not true. The vision was sealed up. And Zechariah says the same thing about the restoration. Zechariah is also about the same time frame. It's not about the first century or a second coming. In that day, a fountain will be opened up for the house of David and for the habits of Jerusalem for sin and for impurity. See, this is talking about the cleansing of their sin that led them into exile. It will be that day, declares Jehovah of hosts, that will cut off the names of the idols from the land, and they will no longer be remembered. And I will also cause the prophets and the unclean spirits to pass away from the land. And if it will be that everyone still prophesies, then his father and mother who gave birth to him will say to him, you shall not live, you've spoken this falsely in the name of Jehovah. See, prophecy was ended when they came back to the land. Well, you say, how do we know what's going to happen then? Read the Torah, the curses and the blessings. Isaiah 44:28 and 45:1. It is I who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and all my good pleasure he will complete. And saying of Jerusalem, she will be built, and of the temple, your foundation will be laid. Thus says Jehovah to Cyrus, his anointed. See, the translators lied to you. If they had translated this as it actually reads in Hebrew, would you still believe the same thing? Thus says Jehovah to Cyrus, his Messiah. And I've shown this to like Christians who don't know Hebrew, and they freak out. What are you saying? That Cyrus is the Messiah? And I've had some block me because I say this. This is what the text says in Hebrew, that Cyrus is the Messiah. But there are many Messiah, as I've talked about. Like, it's not something that's of one man. This is the Talmudist fallacy that the Christians inherited. It's not one man. The anointed or the anointed one, the Messiah, the Messianic Prince, the King of Israel, the High Priest of Israel. See, the High Priest is also Mashiach, anointed. And if you look at how many times it appears in the Torah and the prophets, Leviticus, it talks about the anointed priest. In 1 Samuel, the prophet's anointed. Then King Saul is anointed. And King David is anointed. And look at what David says. This is why the New Testament idea of an anti-Messiah or antichrist is totally ludicrous. See, 1 Samuel chapter 24, verse 6. So he said to his men, far be it from me, because of Jehovah, that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Mashiach, the Messiah, the anointed of Jehovah, to send my hand against him, since he is the Messiah of Jehovah. Like, he could not lay a hand on King Saul. And even when you look further on, the enemies, the physical enemies of Saul, could not kill him. Saul took his own life. Now that sounds familiar, right? Because this is what the New Testament claims. That they could not lay a hand on me. I took my own life. And this is a sign of being cursed. Notice what the Christian translators did. What would Adam teach if the translators had been consistent here and called Cyrus the Messiah? Cyrus did what? After 69 weeks of years, he issued the order to rebuild Jerusalem. And this is the key part of the Daniel 9 prophecy that they just gloss over or misattribute to the 69th week as a separate from the obvious connection to the 70-year exile. In Jeremiah 25:11, the whole land will be a waste place and an object of horror, and these nations will serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Why would anyone presume the 70 weeks are not connected to the 70 years? Because they are hunting for prophecies to make about him. But just as with all prophecies, when you dig in and you see it, it makes their idol look even worse. Like he didn't do any of the things Adam is claiming, or any other Christians. Ezra 1, verse 1 to 2. Now in the first year of Cyrus the king of Persia, in order to complete the word of Jehovah from the mouth of Jeremiah, which is what Daniel 9 was talking about, Jehovah stirred up the spirit of Cyrus the king of Persia, so that he had a proclamation pass through all his kingdom, and also put in writing, saying, thus says Cyrus king of Persia, Yahweh, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of earth. He has appointed me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Yehuda. Isaiah 61, 3-4. And this shows that this whole context, Isaiah 40 to about 61 to 62, is about the Babylonian exile, which means what? Isaiah 53, in the middle of this context, is also about the exile. Now, I know it can be read and interpreted this way because of the New Testament. If the New Testament didn't exist, you would be reading all these witnesses. You would not come to the conclusion that you do. And also, if you read it in the proper translation or in Hebrew, there's no way you would. Isaiah 53, and remember, I'm not a fan of Talmudic interpretation, but it is not a forbidden chapter, as Adam talks about in this video. So when they go and read Isaiah 53, they ask, is that the New Testament? Yeah, because they were probably talking to Jews like yourself that didn't know Hebrew and don't know the Torah and the prophets. And it's just like Christians. If you went around and read Isaiah 54, most Christians wouldn't know what you were reading. It's like, what is that? And you say, well, that's about the afflicted servant. And they're like, that can't be. It's about my idol. It's the chapter after Isaiah 53. Or read verse 10 of Isaiah 53. He will see his seed, and his days will be prolonged. And, I always ask him, when did he see his children? You know what they say? Well, those are spiritual seed. Like, bull crap. It's not spiritual. To grant those who mourn in Zion, giving them a headdress instead of ashes, the oil of rejoicing instead of mourning, the mantle of praise instead of a spirit of fainting. So they will be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of Yahweh, that he may show forth his beautiful glory. Then they will rebuild the ancient waste places. See this connection? The same prophecy. They will raise up the former desolations. And this is also why when this idol quotes Isaiah 61 in the New Testament, I mean, you should be reading the context. It's not about the first century. The ancient waste places were all around him rebuilt. He was walking around in the city rebuilt. Then they will rebuild the ancient waste places. They will raise up the former desolations, and they will make new the ruined cities, the desolations from generation to generation. And all of these things are interconnected. You see how much more beautiful the Tanakh, the Torah, the prophets, the writings, all come together if you remove the New Testament. It's no longer about cherry picking, taking false pretexts to support your idol. Daniel 9:24-27 was about the end of sin that led them into exile in regard to Israel paying for the sin of sacrificing their children, forsaking the Sabbaths, and serving idols. Daniel 9:26, then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing, and the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end of the flood will come with a flood. And its end will come with a flood. Even to the end, there will be war and desolations are decreed. So this is what they believe happened in the first century, and this is because of the Talmudists. And the problem is the end of Jerusalem in the first century was over 40 years after the death of the idol. 40 years is 6.5 sevens. So what is this about? Well, again, the translators really screw this up, making every anointed in this chapter Messiah. So therefore, you think this anointed is the same one that orders the restoration of Israel. But it's not. This is about Cyrus, and this is about the king of Babylon that Cyrus conquered. Then Daniel 9:27, he will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week. If you look back at Daniel 9:24 and make it the same Messiah, that doesn't even make sense. Because remember, Daniel 9:24 says what? He will make an everlasting covenant. But now it's a covenant that's only going to last a week? But in the middle of the week he will make his sacrifice and grain offering cease. And on the ween of abominations one makes desolate, even until complete destruction. One that is decreed is poured out on the one who makes desolate. And this is the problem with the Messianic and Christian interpretation. This last week, in their view, is floating, and it never happened. It hasn't happened yet. But this already all happened. This is recorded in Nehemiah, as Adam pointed out in this video. And notice also the problem. The cessation of sacrifice and grain offering is a curse. This is not a blessing. It is a curse. This is the problem they have in trying to invert the things from Tanakh. They take curses and try to make them blessings. Then they take the blessings and try to make them curses. They take physical things and spiritualize them. And then they take spiritual things and make them physical. You see the same thing with a Talmudist. Like, they put the big box on their head because Deuteronomy 6:4 says, put it between your eyes. Right? So that's got to be literal, right? Put the written word between your eyes and on your hand. This makes complete sense. The Father would be saying, if you strap a box to your head and your hand, you're righteous. No, that's not what he was talking about. And they actually do this, though. They strap a box to their door frame, to their gate, to their head, and believe they are righteous because of that. He's talking about making it inside of your head, inside of your heart, so when your action produces righteous deeds, when you go out from your house, you carry it with you always, because you've meditated on it day and night. It roughly points to around the time of the first century, and he says that, it seems kind of weird what a prophet prophesying of something you believe to be about a specific time, yet is vague about the precise time. Yah doesn't prophesy of far-flung future events, and I've talked about this many times. Yah does not talk about far-flung things. Isaiah was writing to his peers, and Daniel was writing to his peers. Why? So they could be tested. This is so important. But the prophet who speaks a word presumptuously, so they wrote these words down, and for hundreds of years it didn't happen. How do we know yet if they spoken presumptuously? And that the Talmud says you have to wait, and that it will come. So you keep waiting, and then you're like, has it happened yet? No, this is not what Deuteronomy 18:20-22 is telling us. Look at. Now you may say in your heart, how we know the word Yehovah? How will we know the word which Yehovah has not spoken? When a prophet speaks in the name of Yehovah, if the thing does not come about or come true, that is the thing which Yehovah has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously, and you shall not be afraid of him. It's that simple. These were written to contemporary people. And I've shown this is the same with the New Testament. It's failed prophecy of the New Testament that has caused you to believe in delayed prophecy. I think I showed this in the last video, Matthew 15 or 16, maybe it was 16. Yeah, so at the end of Matthew 16, verse 28, truly I say to you, the people around him, there are some of those who are standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. None of them saw the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. So what do? You delay it. And this is what the author of 2 Peter did, which was written in the 2nd century. It's pseudepigrapha. Where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, and who are the fathers? That would be the men that he's imitating. That would be Paul, Peter, John, and all the rest of them. They all fell asleep into Sheol. And yet they still are promising his return is coming soon. All continues just as it was from the beginning of creation. For when they maintain this, it escapes their notice, but by the word of God, the heavens existed long ago, and the earth was formed out of water by water. Okay, that's a straw man, the which the world at the time was destroyed, being deluged with water. But by his word, the present heavens and earth are being reserved for fire. By which word? And I've been over that. None of the Torah and the prophets declare this utter destruction for the creation. Look at Isaiah 54, verse 9. And this is the Noahide covenant, which is both universal and unconditional. This is the promise to all mankind. For this is the waters of Noah to me, that as I have spoken, that the waters of Noah should no more go over the earth. So I have sworn that I would not be wroth with thee, nor rebuke thee. He's telling you, as in the days of Noah, when I promised I would no longer destroy all of mankind, no longer destroy it in the flood of water, why would he then destroy it in a flood of fire? Look at the text. It's so clear once you have the truth. And Yehovah smelled a sweet savor. This is end of Genesis 8. And Yehovah said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground anymore for man's sake. So why would he curse it with fire? For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more every living thing. This have I done. Well, what they say is, that means it won't be with water again. It doesn't say that. This is a promise to never again destroy the earth. And this is why it didn't happen in the first century. It's not going to happen. While the earth remaineth, and seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. And this is one of the ways you know this author is a false prophet. He's trying to explain, why hasn't he returned? All that generation passed away, and yet he's still not returned. So what does he say? Do not let this one fact escape your notice, beloved, that with the Lord, one day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like one day. So we have Daniel saying, according to Adam, a week is a year, right? A week is 7 years. A week is 7 years. And this author of Peter is saying 1,000 years is like one day. Okay. And by the way, we also have Ezekiel, which they love to misquote. And it's amazing they do, because Ezekiel says that he was on his side for a number of days corresponding to the years. So they say, well, the 1,260 days of Daniel were clearly 1,260 years. And this is why you had the Millerites waiting for the return of their idol in the middle of the 19th century. But that's not a connection either. See, Ezekiel was on his side for how many years? 390 days. Isn't that interesting? We just talked about the 490 years of sin. And now we have 390 days of years for the iniquity of Israel that he bore. Yes, he bore their iniquity for the equivalent of 390 years. So why would we presume this prophecy is of some far-flung future, that the reader of Daniel could not test Daniel? And you really want to prove this? Well, that should be like that. Open up Isaiah 7 and read through chapter 8, the 2 chapters. There's no way to deny the truth once you do this. Isaiah 7:11-16 wasn't about the first century. And Daniel 9 wasn't about the first century either. Yeshua didn't rebuild and restore Jerusalem, and the end of sacrifice the New Testament claims with his death, that is a sign of being cursed. And he actually talks about this. The Messiah will be cut off. That's another word for killing. No, it's not. There's a word for killing. And if Isaiah, if Jeremiah, if Daniel meant he would be killed, he would have said that. Yes, there is, and this is part of yours and others' dishonesty. To be cut off does not mean to be killed. Jeremiah 11:19, which is the fulfillment of Isaiah 53:7-8. But I was like a gentle lamb led to the slaughter, and I did not know that they had devised thoughts against me, saying, let us make the tree with its fruit a ruin, and let us cut him off from the land of the living. See, it's right there, that he was cut off from the land of the living. Does that mean they were trying to kill him? No, it means they didn't want him to get married and to have children. And this is why, as we'll see here in Isaiah 53:10, after 7 and 8, let's read that again. because it's a direct parallel to what Jeremiah just said there. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb led to his slaughter. See Jeremiah 11 again? Like a gentle lamb led to the slaughter. The same language. I mean, do you believe this is just coincidental? This dual fulfillment garbage? And like a sheep that is silent before its shearers, he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. And as for his generation, who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living. That's exactly the same language in the same context. And it's not about Jeremiah. That for the transgression of my people, striking was due to him. And what amazes me is you have Talmudists like Tovia never making this connection. Like, are they really eating of Yehovah themselves? Why have I never seen a Talmudist make the connection that Ezekiel bore the iniquity? Because they also believe this is a messianic passage about some future Messiah suffering. I mean, where do you think the Christians got it from? That's why I made that meme the other day. And like when you talk to your child, and Christianity is a child of Talmudism, say, how did you learn to have such terrible eisegesis interpretation of the text? And then you realized, oh, they learned it from me, but they'll never have that reflection. I've talked about this with Tovia. Like, he makes this comparison to Mormons existing to show how Jews feel about Christians. Okay, why do the Samaritans exist? So that you'll realize how we feel about Talmudists when they follow the text into a very correct interpretation, more correct than you, that Shechem is the chosen city, not Jerusalem, that there shouldn't be a temple of stone, it should be a tabernacle, as was constructed and directed by Yehovah to Moshe. No, there should not be a temple of stone. Yehovah was pleased to crush him. Why him putting him to grief? If you would place his soul as a guilt offering. Remember what Ezekiel says, that his soul was a guilt offering. He will see his seed, and Ezekiel also, by the way, I don't know how many of you know this, he was cut off from the land of the living for a time as well. Because it's Ezekiel 24, where they say, and the word of Yehovah came to me, saying, Son of man, behold, I am about to take from you the desire of your eyes with a blow, but you shall not mourn, and you shall not weep, your tears shall not come. Groan silently, and make no mourning for the dead. Bind on your headdress, and put on your shoes on your feet, and do not cover your mustache, and do not eat the bread of men. So I spoke to the people in the mornings, and in the evening, my wife died. She died before bearing him children. He was effectively cut off from the land of the living. This is why he promises of the suffering servant, he will see his children. Jeremiah will marry when he leaves Jerusalem. Ezekiel will also marry and have children. He will prolong his days, meaning what? That he will not die. And, this is so important to understand. He will not die. If Isaiah was writing about human sacrifice, Isaiah is a false prophet. The idol of the New Testament never saw his seed. There are some people that believe he did, but that's not in the New Testament. He did not have his days prolonged. Resurrection is resurrection. That's not what the text is saying. It's just like with the word cut off versus killing. There is a Hebrew word to come across with the idea of resurrection. It's not prolong your days. And if you look back at what he says to Hezekiah, it's the same sort of language. You will have your days prolonged by 15 years. And with one sentence, Adam destroys the New Testament. It says at timestamp 6159.
Comes, he's going to be killed, but not because of himself, not for anything. Right? He's as we know, he was killed for the people as a sacrifice. And then it says the sanctuary.
And there you go. He was killed for the people as a sacrifice. And this is a man who claims to have been a Jew. This is a man that claims to teach Torah. Yet he just said that a man, and yes, he was a man, and this is one of the things he goes into, is this hyper deification of this man. See, Acts 2:22, men of Israel, listen to these words. Yesu the Nazarene, a man. A man. And this is in the New Testament. This is why the Trinity is nonsense. The New Testament teaches he was a man. Even from the Gospel of John. John 8:40. John 8:40 says, but now you're seeking to kill me, a man. He doesn't call himself a God. He says, I am a man attested to you by God. He doesn't say, I am a hybrid being, not a man. I'm not a man because I am the Son of God. And that's not what he says. He calls himself a man. He calls himself the Son of Man. The Son of Man was sacrificed for your sin. And you guys, how can you say you know Torah, but you believe in human sacrifice? And even worse, that Yah would sacrifice his quote-unquote own son. He would sacrifice his own son, which is a violation of Torah. Leviticus 18:21, you shall not give any of your seed to pass them over to Molech, nor shall you profane the name of Elohim. I am Yehovah. Deuteronomy 12:29-31, when Yehovah, your Elohim, cuts off before you the nations which you are going in to dispossess, and you dispossess them and inhabit their land, beware lest you become ensnared to follow after them after they are destroyed before you, and lest you inquire after their Elohim, saying, how do these nations serve their Elohim, that I may do likewise? And you shall not do thus toward Yehovah your Elohim, for every abominable act which Yehovah hates they have done for their Elohim, for they even burn their sons and daughters in fire for their gods. He's saying, don't do that for me in the manner that they do for their idols. And yet you believe, and this is something I challenge every Christian on, you believe that the Most High sacrificed his own son, violating Torah. And many of you will say, well, it wasn't human sacrifice because he volunteered. He's like a soldier going into battle and jumping on the grenade. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And Torah doesn't permit that either. He wasn't burnt in the fire, so it doesn't violate Torah. And yes, I've heard that too. And this is part of the problem. I mean, you claim this, he fulfilled the Torah, but this makes it even worse. Exodus 12:10, which is a command of your Passover offering. And you shall not leave any of it, the offering, the lamb, until morning. But whatever is left of it until morning, you shall burn with fire. And I remember when I was reading Daniel Craig and his Questioning Paul book and his other book, Yada Yah. I actually read these pretty deeply because, I was convinced that this man knew the truth. Then he started to say this nonsense where Yeshua was burnt to ashes for the end of the Sabbath. I'm like, what? Where are you getting this from? And I even asked him, he said, well, you have to read my book. Like, okay, you're not even pointing me to the Torah. And this is like the huge red flag. I just cut that man off that quick. And you're not pointing to the Torah. He was not burnt with fire, but even if he was, you are also presenting Yah as someone who doesn't care about the Torah he gave Moses. That he doesn't care. That he just will violate the law. And as a Passover offering, which isn't even for sin, the Passover offering must be burnt with fire. And if it's not, it is an abomination. The fact that human sacrifice is already profane, the fact that you have Romans performing it and not Levites, your sacrifice is an abomination. On a tree, an abomination. His body beaten and bruised, an abomination. I mean, this is all Torah. You can't present a bruised offering, right? I forget what verse that is, unfortunately, though. Yeah, so the lamb shall be without blemish. And then it talks about again, take one bull of the herd of the two rams without blemish. If it is an offering, a burnt offering from the herd, he shall offer a male without blemish. If it is a burnt offering from the flock, from the sheep of the goats, he shall bring a male without blemish. And it's over and over again, it says this. And there is a verse in Deuteronomy, I forget the chapter and verse. It actually like says, like if you do this, it is a serious sin. Yeah, Deuteronomy 15:21. If it has any blemish, if it is lame or blind or has any serious blemish, whatever, you shall not sacrifice it to Yahweh your Elohim. And this is crazy. Like, how do you not see this and then say, well, he didn't have any defect. He was without sin. That's not what it was about. And this is part of the issue. Like, animals don't sin. That's not the point of being without defect. It's physical things. You are spiritualizing. Oh, what's this? 6159? That's weird. Boom. Yeah. That looks like a great thing to do. It's much like Cain taking the fruit of the ground, the very worst offering. And not only is it the fruit of the ground, it's his own son. And this is why I like to point to the parable of the vineyard, right? Matthew 21, or I think that's right. Yeah, the parable of the vineyard, vine growers, which is also in Mark and Luke, where let's read Luke's version this time. Now the owner of the vineyard said, "What will I do? I will send my beloved son, which is Israel, not Yeshua. Perhaps they will respect him." But when the vine growers saw him, they were reasoning with one another, saying, "This is the heir. Let us kill him so that the inheritance will be ours." Why would Israel be saying this when they know the promises of Yah are secure, that they are the heir? See, this is the replacement theology of the New Testament. Yeshua is not the heir. And this is like goes over your head. But when the vine growers saw him, they were reasoning with one another, saying, "This is the heir. Let us kill him, so the inheritance will be ours." So they threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What then will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come and destroy these vine growers and will give the vineyard to others. Okay? So he died according to Adam, And this is what he just said. Let's listen to it again.
And unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. So basically, he's saying that when he comes, he's going to be killed, but not because of himself, not for anything. Right? He's as we know, he was killed for the people as a sacrifice.
He was killed for the people as a sacrifice. But the New Testament says that the people who he was killed for will be destroyed. How do you make sense of this? I'm thinking that, the parable of the vineyard, you don't even know the parable of the vineyard. You don't. You just want to be an idolater and preach idolatry. Oh, yes. So one of the things his guest says, and I forget his name, he was the chief cornerstone that the builders rejected. Because, the New Testament quotes this, so it must be true. And Psalm 118 is the context. Let's start at verse 20. This is the gate of Yahweh. The righteous will enter through it. I will give thanks to you, and you have answered me, and you have become my salvation. Who has become his salvation? Not Yeshua, Yahweh. The stone which the builders reject. And yes, I know that in Hebrew, the word for salvation is sometimes Yeshua. It's also Teshuvah. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And so many of them, they actually do not believe the text in the New Testament. And this is what Justin talked about when he was coming out before he completely fell away because of their gaslighting against him. Like, most of these ministries on YouTube don't believe the words of Paul. Adam himself, before Justin came out, he had a video up talking against the words of Paul. But as soon as Justin completely fell away, he removed the video and went back to preaching Paul. He only cares about the donations that he's going to get. And, this is part of the issue with the... where was that at? Let's go to here. So Nathan Reynolds, he had a video up where he exposes Adam Fink. And this is what I was talking about in my previous video. That, there are many witnesses besides Justin that have come to me personally and talked about how debauchery is common in this ministry.
Traced all the way back to the original tribes of Aaron. When I was working with him, he told me constantly that I was like Moses and he was like Aaron, and that together we would lead the end times army of the Lord into the new kingdom. Adam believes that his job is to amass the 144,000 saints of the end times so they can make war against all the evil people of the earth, kill and slaughter everybody who doesn't keep the Torah. Adam is amassing a bunch of followers for himself on his borrowed land where he's trying to raise baby goats so he can slaughter them for feasts, but he's unfortunately incapable of doing that since they all got diseases and died. Adam is encouraging and promoting polygamous relationships where children are involved, so creating sort of a unsafe, unhealthy, strange family dynamic for those living out on the land. Furthermore, Adam thinks that the people living in Israel right now are all fake Jews, they're all going to hell, and God's going to judge and destroy them eventually, and that he himself is the real Jew that's designed to lead everyone to the truth.
And sadly, I have confirmation of all of that. Nathan uploaded a video. I don't know if it's still on the internet or if I'm going to even see it here because sometimes YouTube filters things out. Yeah, see, restricted mode is enabled again. So, and it just bugs the heck out of me. I need to get a VPN so it doesn't do that. Nathan uploaded a video where he talked about exposing like the child sexual abuse happening in Adam's ministry. And this is like, how can this man still be a teacher? He, even by Christian standards, he shouldn't be a teacher. So let's go back to Psalm 118. The stone which the builders rejected, and this is what the New Testament quotes, has become the chief cornerstone. And this is from Yahweh. So they believe that, this man is the chief cornerstone when it's about Yahweh. Why would Yahweh allow for a different stone, a man, in which he called himself? Remember, it is marvelous in our eyes. This is the day which Yahweh has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. O Yahweh, save. O Yahweh, succeed. Who is the chief cornerstone that the builders rejected? Yahweh. They rejected Yahweh, not the idol. And the author of this psalm didn't say anything about the New Testament idol. Peter uses this to show everyone. That's what he says. And Peter is more trustworthy than reading this psalm in Hebrew in context. He actually didn't come to do away with the law. Okay. How do you figure that with, like, the phrase you just said, that, that he is a human sacrifice, which is against the Torah? Matthew 5:21-22. Let's go through that, which is right after he makes this claim. You have heard it said that the ancients were told, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be guilty before the court. That's Torah. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court. That's not Torah. And notice what he says here. I say to you, I, not Yahweh. That's speaking presumptuously. And whoever says to his brother, Rakah, shall be guilty before the Sanhedrin. Again, not in Torah. Whoever says, you fool, shall be guilty enough to go into the fiery Gehenna. This is all added commandments. These are all violations of Torah. How can you say that he's not coming away to do with the law? He's doing away with the law right here. He's saying it's not enough to say you shall not murder. Now you can't be angry. You can't say Rakah, and you can't call a man a fool. I mean, okay. Is he going to go to the fiery Gehenna? And what do you mean? Well, look at Matthew 23. You fools and blind men. Okay, so he can't keep his own added commandments when he's calling men fools? And this isn't even the worst New Testament violation, by the way. It's not. And we could go to like Matthew 15 when he says, it is not what enters the mouth that defiles a man, in verse 11. False. We could go to Matthew 19:12. For there are eunuchs who were born that way, right? And I've talked about this verse numerous times. This whole idea of making yourself a eunuch for the kingdom of heaven is a violation of Torah. The blood communion, John 6:56, he who eats my flesh and drinks my blood, violations of Torah. Can't do that. I have come to fulfill. And how exactly, in your own words, does human sacrifice, which is an abomination, fulfill Torah? How does the pagan act of theophagy, which we just read, fulfill Torah? How did him whipping the Torah abiding money changers, and I didn't go over that one, when you are allowed to bring your money to the chosen city and offer it in exchange for an offering? That's who he was whipping. How did him telling us, and also, by the way, Isaiah 53 says he did no violence. And, this is something that brought up with, the Paul deniers, the Christians, the Messianics. If he did no violence, what do you call spending the whole day forming a whip? And this is actually what the text of John says, that he was braiding a whip to do violence. Do you think a whip's not going to do violence? How did him telling us what we put our mouth in doesn't defile us, fulfill Torah? Idolaters are blind. You're blind to what the Torah actually teaches. So let's go on now. In Isaiah, it says he will come and magnify the law. So human sacrifice and theophagy, they magnify the law. That's magnification of Torah. Come on. And you really believe that? Yeah. And look at this is from Isaiah 42:21. Yahweh was pleased for his righteousness' sake, that he makes the law great and majestic. See what happens when you use a specific translation. This is why he's a fraud. I mean, he should know that in the Hebrew, it's not magnifying anyways, but in the context, the one making the Torah great and majestic magnifies a terrible translation is Yehovah, not the idol. And why did Isaiah record this? Because the Israelites were ignoring Torah. They were ignoring it. So he's saying, I'm going to make it great and majestic by punishing you. Sacrificing their own sons and daughters and performing ritualistic theophagy. So Yah is telling them, by Torah, justice is coming even for you. Not that some idol will come down, which violates Deuteronomy 30:12-14, and teach us a new Torah that is magnified. I believe his offering came to cut off sacrifice and oblation. And yes, he does say this. He believes that's a blessing. And you see how Adam doesn't even recognize a curse. Doesn't. He reads this as if it's a blessing to replace the murder of an innocent man over and above Torah-abiding sacrifice and oblation. And it's literally a crazy interpretation. It's upside down. Ezekiel of the Messiah says in chapter 44, verse 27, and on that day he goes into the sanctuary, into the inner court to minister in the sanctuary. He shall bring near his sin offering, declares Lord Yehovah. If the Messiah, according to Ezekiel, is bringing forth an offering for his sin, then how could he, through human sacrifice of himself, cut off sacrifice and oblation? You see how bad interpretation just amplifies their lies? For the overspreading of abominations he shall make desolate. Indeed, and he did. Look at Luke 13. Now at the same time, there were some present who were reporting to him about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mixed with their sacrifices. Who do you think Pilate is talking about? The Galileans that Pilate murdered on a cross, then put their blood on the altar? And Paul is telling you the same story, but he is glorifying human sacrifice as being superior to animal sacrifice. And this is what the author of Hebrews does he just amps it up. Like what animal sacrifice couldn't do, the human sacrifice on the cross did. Like just insane. This is why Yah allowed Jerusalem to be destroyed, though. If you look at what is happening here, the Romans defiled the temple. They put the blood of a man, a Galilean, and you think this is a coincidence. It's not. It's allegory. They put the blood of the Galilean on the altar. The temple was forsaken by the abomination of desolation, human sacrifice. And Paul is in the temple court preaching of Jesus' human sacrifice when he was arrested. So now 63:28.
That Messiah has many names or many terms. The angel of Yahweh, the messenger of Yahweh, which we'll see in Malachi in a bit. The word of Yahweh, Prince of Peace, all of them. So here we see Messiah as a living being called the word of Yahweh. So Isaiah 2, verse 1.
Yeah, you see what he just did there? That every time you see the phrase, the word of Yahweh, it's about the idol. Why would you presume that? This is an insane interpretation of the text. Let's go to Isaiah 2, though. Let's read this. The word that Isaiah, the son of Amos, saw concerning Yehuda and Jerusalem. And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountains of Yahweh's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, shall be exalted above the hills, and all the Goy, the nations, shall flow into it. That didn't happen. And you hear what Adam says here. Like, that's the second coming. Where did Isaiah say that? And many people shall go and say, and this is the word of Yahweh, by the way, come, let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of Elohim of Jacob, and he will teach us his ways. We will walk in his paths, for out of Zion shall go forth the Torah and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. The word is the Torah. It's the same thing. It's not a man. And he shall judge among the nations and shall rebuke many people. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. See, this is why it's not your second coming. What you say is about judgment, when he's saying the people are going to drop their weapons of war and become farmers. Where is that in the New Testament? It's not there. It's about fire raining down on all of the earth and everyone being destroyed. And this is what I said in my notes here. When did the people beat their swords into plowshares? When did the Torah go forth from Zion? You know, I've been over that numerous times. The earliest church, the earliest Christian church, which Adam is standing on, is always and has been anti-Torah. Look at Justin Martyr's writings, his dialogue with Trypho, his straw man Jew, in 140 to 150 AD. The law was given to the Jews not because they were God's choice people, but because they were the most wicked people over other nations. That's why the Torah was given, and that's why they didn't follow it. Remember, I read Ignatius of Antioch in an earlier episode of this series. Like, why did Ignatius say that if you keep the Sabbath, you have fallen from the Christ? And this is what the early church taught about Yah's chosen people and about the Torah of Yah. And this is the foundation Adam is standing on. Now, he believes 90% of the theological garbage from Rome. The first and second coming, and this is the great violence of the text. It's not what Isaiah is saying here. And this is your interpretation that splits the text apart, cherry picks individual words, like this. And what he's pointing to here is literally 3 words. The Bar Yehoah, or in English, the word of Yahweh, as if it's a person. And then those words are not fulfilled. You can offset to this mythical second coming. Yes, it's mythical. Look at Revelation 22:20, and this is throughout the New Testament. He who bears witness of things to these things says, yes, I am coming quickly. Takios, quickly. Amen. Come, Lord Yeshu. And quickly, not 2,000 years. All of the New Testament points to this immediate promised return of the idol. And I've already read the one from Matthew 16:28. This generation will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming. His second coming was supposed to happen 2,000 years ago. When it didn't happen, the theology shifted and began to spiritualize the promises. This is why in later writings like 2 Peter and John, which is a 2nd century gospel, they spiritualize the mountain of Yah to the spirit and truth nonsense. No longer will you worship on Mount Gerizim or Mount Zion. The Samaritans believe it's Mount Gerizim, which is correct. And the Jews had come to believe that it's Mount Zion, which is not in Torah. It shouldn't be Mount Zion. That, instead of that, it's going to be in spirit and truth, which none of the prophets say. Not a single one. It's not in the Torah. It's not in the prophets. It's only in John. And it's in John because Jerusalem was destroyed and the second coming didn't happen. You see right here, the word of Yahweh is a living being. No, we don't, Adam. And I'm not going to read this passage again. We've already read it. We've heard Adam read it. It doesn't say the word of Yahweh is a physical being. This is your construct over the text from your pretext. See, the Torah is going forth and the word of Yahweh. It's connected. This is what the Hebrew is doing. The Torah is Debar Yahweh. Remember John, who teaches this pagan teaching of Philo, and this is like something Father was giving me big last night. I was just sitting there meditating on the word. Like, John is the only New Testament author who says this nonsense. If you just take one book out of the New Testament, take the Gospel of John out of the New Testament, would Christians still believe he is the Word made flesh? No. It's nowhere else in the New Testament. It's certainly not in the Torah and the prophets. Only John used this influence from the Hellenistic Jew Philo, who made this attribution in the first century. It's nowhere else. And this is one of the ways you can tell a book has true or false teachings, by the way. If I remove Isaiah, does that change Torah? If I remove Paul's letters from the New Testament, will that change my interpretation of the New Testament? Yes. If I remove John, will that change my interpretation of the New Testament? Absolutely yes. It's the word of Yahweh came to Abraham. Yeah, he does this like everywhere. And I'm not going to cover every instance of this because it's just crazy. And I've quoted the word of Yahweh here that came to Abram in the vision. I mean, this is all based on one New Testament book. A book, if you wasn't in the New Testament, if this wasn't canon, none of you would believe this. None of the prophets say this. And the text doesn't say this. You're bending it to your will. Do these, and after these things, the word of Yahweh came to Abram in a vision, saying, "Do not fear, Abram. I am the shield to you, and your reward shall be very great." That's the word. That's the Devar. It's not saying a man came to him, which is what Daniel says, of Michael and Gabriel, that a man, not an angel, it says a man, came to him in a vision. The word that came to Abram is, "Do not fear, Abram. I am a shield to you. Your reward shall be very great." That's the word of Yahweh. And the only way to interpret this any differently is to eat the words of John and believe it applies to the whole Bible. The Messiah is the one who has been interacting with man. You see, this is the same thing they do. Like anytime they see like the angel of the Lord or, a man, like a perfect example of this is Joshua. And this is what I've noticed actually like after my deprogramming. So in Joshua 5 is one of these examples. Now it happened when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man. It doesn't say an angel. It was a man. A man. It wasn't Yeshua. And how would that even make sense? Yeshua saw Yeshua standing there? Because his name is Yahushua of Nun. Right? It just says he was a man. Who was standing opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand, and Yehoshua went to him and said to him, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" He said, "No, rather I indeed come now as a commander of the host of Yahweh." And Yehoshua fell on his face in earth and bowed down and said to him, and their assumption is he's bowing down to the man. He's bowing down because he serves Yahweh. What was my Lord to say to his slave? And the commander of the hosts of Yahweh said to Yehoshua, remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you're standing is holy. And he did so. And, that's all it says of this man. That's all it says. And you take these 3 verses and try to make them in support of human sacrifice and theophagy. Psalm 50:21, and I love this verse. These things you have done, and I kept silent. You thought that I was just like you. And this is what they believe. They believe God became a man, the Word made flesh, that he's just like us. I will reprove you and state the case in order before your eyes. Yes, Adam, you thought, like other Christians, that God was like you. Problem is, Yah is not a man nor the son of man. In fact, Isaiah, and I really strongly suggest reading this, Isaiah goes deep repeatedly on this. Isaiah 45:14-18, thus says Yahweh, the fruit of the labors of Egypt and the profile of Ethiopia and the Sabaeans, the men of stature, will come over to you and will be yours. They will walk behind you. They will come over in chains and will bow down to you. They will make supplication to you, saying, surely Elohim is with you, and there is none else, no other Elohim. Truly you are an Elohim who hides himself, O Elohim of Israel. Savior, they will put to shame and even be dishonored. All of them, the craftsmen of idols, will go away together in dishonor, and Israel has been saved by Yahweh with an everlasting salvation. And you will be put to shame or dishonored to all eternity. For thus says Yahweh, who created the heavens, and he is the God who formed the earth and made it. He established it and did not create it a formless place, formed it to be inhabited. I am Yahweh, and there is none else. Isaiah says this like in every chapter of the servant's parable poem here. Every chapter. I am the Savior, and there is none else, none beside me. I formed the heavens and stretched them alone. There was no one beside me. I mean, all of these destroy the idea of what John says, that he was there in the beginning. Hebrews says the same thing. It's pagan nonsense. Isaiah tells us that Yahweh alone created the heavens and the earth. There was none with him. He is the only God and the only Savior. If there was a word made flesh, as Philo and John claimed to be found after Yah revealed the truth, the Torah, to Moses, and his prophets point us back toward Torah, not toward human sacrifice, wouldn't this be the perfect place to tell us about the Son of God, the Word of Yahweh, who would become flesh in his right arm? Wouldn't this be the perfect place to say, put your faith and trust in the Son of God, Yeshua, to be revealed? Or, like Jeremiah 3:12 is another one, which is in the context of Israel being divorced. Go and call out these words toward the north and say, return, faithless Israel. They can return without going through the New Testament idol. And this would be a perfect place for Jeremiah to prophesy of their need to turn to this Son of Man in the New Testament. But he doesn't. I will not look upon you in anger, for I am one of eternal mercy, loving kindness, declares Jehovah. I will not be angry forever. Only acknowledge your iniquity, that you have transgressed against Yahweh, your Elohim, and have scattered your ways of harlotry to the strangers under every green tree. And you have not listened to my voice, declares Yahweh. Return, O faithless sons, declares Yahweh, for I am a master to you, and I will take you, one from a city and two from a family. I will bring you to Zion. So why didn't Jeremiah mention our need to go through JC? Why didn't he mention that we have to have this offering of human sacrifice and ritual theophagy to have our iniquity forgiven? It's not there. I mean, okay. This is what we have to really think about. If you took away every book of the New Testament, and remember, the New Testament didn't even exist until the 3rd century. Until then, it was just a bunch of writings passed around. And there were a lot of writings that didn't even become canonized, that have very different theologies than what you believe. See, in Luke 24:27, he makes this claim of himself. And beginning with Moses and with all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things concerning himself in all the writings. Okay, so here's my challenge. Tear out your New Testament. Try to erase the pretexts you have built in your mind. Read the Torah, Moses, and the prophets, and see if you come to the same conclusions. You know, I actually heard one of these Messianics say, it's great to study the Torah, but you have to do so looking for Yeshua. I have to play Where's Waldo with the text, otherwise I'm reading it wrong. I mean, if this statement is truth, you know, that he is in the Moses and the prophets, I shouldn't have to play Where's Waldo and write him in like Adam is doing, or like all of the Messianics and Christians do. This is literally what you do. You write him in and ignore passages that clearly contradict your message, like Psalm 51. You do not delight in sacrifice, otherwise I would give it. You are not pleased with burnt offering. The sacrifices of Elohim are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart, O God, you will not despise. This is after David committed murder and adultery, 2 sins that have no sacrifice. There's no atonement possible. Yet according to the text, he was forgiven, and not because he put his faith in the Son of God. It doesn't say that. And this is part of the problem. You know, I believed this as a Christian. I was always wondering, like, why would God, in the middle of the 1st century, in like 1500 to 1800 years after Torah, suddenly reveal these new truths? Why didn't he reveal it to Israel, his son? It doesn't make any sense. It's not logical. And this is why you rely on emotion. It's why you rely heavily on testimony, on people who have had visions and signs and wonders happen to them. They rely heavily on testimony because the text does not support them. We'll pray and meditate about continuing further on this. I think it may be worth it because next he's going to go into Isaiah 53, and that is one stronghold that absolutely has to be torn down. Isaiah 53, if it was about human sacrifice, makes Isaiah a false prophet. Remember what I said? You know, you could take Daniel out of the Tanakh. You could take Esther out of the Tanakh. You can even take the Psalms out of the Tanakh. And it doesn't change Torah. Torah doesn't rely on Isaiah being true. It doesn't. The New Testament does. If they make Isaiah a false prophet by saying he's preaching about human sacrifice, then that not only destroys the New Testament, you've destroyed Isaiah. And me, from my position, I lose nothing as Torah is still truth. You lose everything if Isaiah is about human sacrifice. I want to get to the timestamp so we can stop it for tomorrow. Here we go. Okay. So this is what we're going to discuss next. This is so important to understand. And notice, like every Christian He claims this is a secret chapter the Jews don't read. This conspiracy is not true. It's not true. And I challenge you, read Isaiah 54, which is also about the afflicted servant. Shalom. And Yah willing, we'll be back tomorrow.